Welcome to K. Elizabeth Toasts, a podcast celebrating people who increase our quality of life. I'm your host, K. Elizabeth. Each episode is a heartfelt interview of a remarkable person making lives better through one of the 5 social determinants of health. The World Health Organization says these social determinants can impact up to 55% of our health outcomes. That's more than our lifestyle choices and medical care combined. In this episode, we are focusing on the social determinant of access to quality education. Give a listen if you are in need of a dopamine hit, or if you like toast, because this toasts for you.
I'm Josh Crossan, Executive Director of EdAllies, which is an education advocacy group here in Minnesota, and the co-host of the Amplify EdAllies podcast, where we talk about education policy. I go by he or they pronouns. I'm originally from Washington State, and from a single parent household. I was destined to go to the high school where my mom and dad met. It was at the time my high school had a 17% high school graduation rate, 17. So my mom said, I can't have my son go into the school community. So my mom worked a herculean effort. She worked 3 jobs to get me to a private school that was about 40 minute drive away there, and then 40 minutes back. So graduating high school, I just, celebrated my 20-year high school reunion, and the friends that I made throughout high school, they're all doctors, they're lawyers, they're all professionals in their own right, set up for success. And the friends that I had in middle school, elementary school, some of them are doing okay, right? But a lot of them, some of my friends that I did Boy Scouts with, they're in prison. Some are dead. A lot of them are continuing cycles of poverty. And it really isn't based on our intelligence or how hard we work. It really is how our community invests in the well-being of certain communities based on, and that often breaks down to the color of our skin, our zip code, the amount of money in our parents' bank account. And I bring this up because I worked for my congressman in Washington, D.C., Congressman Adam Smith. I was the only person of color working within the Washington State delegation in the House. And the narrative that I often brought back was, my mom is facing unemployment during the Great Recession. So when you're taking votes on extending unemployment insurance, please know that you're impacting my mom, or that when you're taking votes on increasing the minimum wage, know that my community is going to be impacted directly. And so really bringing in that value to my member of Congress, and then offered this opportunity of working in education in Minnesota. And I was like, education, like I've worked on healthcare implementation. I've worked on budget and taxes. Education just feels a little soft. And I will say it's the hardest area of policy I've ever had to work in. Or I've ever had the privilege to work in.
Do you want to start by describing what EdAllies is?
So EdAllies, we're an education advocacy group that is focused on making sure that we're centering all conversations on education on students, specifically students of color, low-income learners, students with disabilities, Native American students, and students from historically underserved communities. So our focus primarily is on students, specifically students from historically underserved communities. And what we're most well known for is our policy advocacy. We're often running around at the Capitol. There are people at the Capitol fighting for a lot of interest, especially around education. You have people doing great work supporting and representing the principals through the Principals Association, the teachers through the Teachers Union, the school counselors. And we really like to see ourselves as fighting for the needs and interest of students from historically underserved communities. So we are steadfast in centering conversations on our students. We really focus on policy as an aftermath of organizing directly with students and families, understanding what they need, and the research. What is going on throughout the state of Minnesota, what's going on throughout the country, and how can we replicate those best practices in our schools? So policy is what we're known for, but it really is the end result of a lot of deep community engagement and research and organizing.
I appreciate that you clarified that the advocacy and the policy changes are really the end result as opposed to where you start. What are you doing before you get to the policy part?
Yeah, we often ask the question like why and what, right? So why are we doing the things that we do? Whenever I bring up education in public conversation, um, people are often like, we just got to pay teachers more. That's great. Yes. W- let's get to that goal by taking some steps back. My Our goal is to make sure that kids of color, kids with disabilities, Native American learners, and kids from historically underserved communities are served well. That is our lighthouse. That is our focus, right? And so if teacher salaries are being considered, how do we do this equitably, and how and why do we need that in order to get to where students can access those resources and that support? Um, so asking the why, asking the how, we want all kids to be able to read at grade level. We want all kids to be able to meet their full potential. We all want kids to be thriving in math and science. We also want kids to be exposed to the arts, to music, to have a supportive network. How do we do that? How are school communities doing that in Minnesota? We're going to be actually doing a tour of different sites that have increased their literacy rates significantly over the last few years, and saying, what's your secret sauce and what can districts be doing? What are you doing so that we can figure out how districts can be adopting best practices? Matamidi School District, Monroe, like these are all sites that are like seeing extreme instances of increased literacy rates. And we want other districts to be able to follow those practices. Also, what's going on nationwide. Next week, I'm going to Arizona to figure out how they're solving for their teacher shortages, and are there best practices that we can be adopting here in Minnesota that Arizona is picking up. So we do a lot of that research behind the scenes, but a lot of the work that we're doing is qualitative data gathering. We go to the Urban League Family Day and give $5 gift cards to families just to say, how is your school community supporting you? What are your kids needing? What are your kids excited about when school starts? What are kids nervous about or afraid of when school starts? And the data that comes from that, I mean, I will say nearly every family says, I want my child to be safe, I want a strong community, and I want my kid to learn. In that order. Those are the top three elements: safety, community, and academic access.
Within EdAllies, it sounds like the vast majority of the work that you do is gathering information, crunching those numbers, and then being able to put those in front of legislators.
Yeah. One of the coalitions that we're part of, the Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition, we're aiming to reduce exclusionary discipline practices to replace those with practices that actually work to improve behavior in the long term. Black students nationwide are being suspended or expelled 3 times the rate than white students. In Minnesota, it's about 8 times the rate. Native American students and students with disabilities are the highest rates. 50% of all suspensions and expulsions are for kids with disabilities, and they only make up 12 to 15% of our student population. Native American students have the highest rate percentage-wise. And so without talking specifically about the student groups that are most impacted by these policies, we're really missing a chunk of the conversation. So as we said, tell us your stories. What's going on? We heard one kid get suspended because they wouldn't put their chapstick away. The number one reason why Native American students are suspended or expelled is for truancy. So they're missing school, and the penalty is miss more school. So through this engagement process, we literally heard the stories, heard the problem, went and said, all right, now here's the policy. What do we need to change so that the policy reflects your understanding of the problem? We did the same thing with teacher licensure. We brought teachers from all over the state and said, why can't you get licensed in Minnesota? And they told their stories, and I said, okay, here's the policy. Where's the breakdown? And they identified through storytelling, we identified where the breakdown was so that we can actually go then and change the policy. they said there's this kind of gatekeeping that's going on around licensure, where if you move from a different state to come to Minnesota, you had to kind of get the blessing of a higher ed institution in order to get a license in the state.
Oh, okay. So no reciprocity.
No reciprocity in policy or mind. We changed the focus from a higher ed institution system that protects licenses to the state determines what standards a teacher has to have. And by doing that, we increased teacher diversity in the state of Minnesota by 50% over the last 8 years.
Did you say 50?
50%, yeah. So huge increases just by changing it from a higher ed-led system to a standards-based system that the state controls. I will say originally we were working on teacher licensure as a way to get more teachers into the workforce that we knew were doing really good things for kids in other states. But the result was that, and we got exponential growth in career and technical education teachers and more teachers of color within the profession. And so it's been amazing work, and it's really focused on students. Students should be at the center. We brought about 60 students to the Capitol last year who said, please don't take my teachers' licenses away. They have moved mountains for me in my life.
How did you get students to go? Like, are you saying that they testified?
They testified. They filled legislative offices. We had 30 students in one legislator office. At one point, we had a day at the Capitol, and we only were able to do that with our partners. So our partners at Bridgemakers for Youth, our partners at Good Trouble, the National Parents Union, Voices for Racial Justice, Great Minnesota Schools, our ecosystems that we create allow us to be super effective.
If you've got someone who just wants to do good somehow in school, what can they do?
Yeah, and I think there are two ways to answer this question. One is that personal question. I often hear from parents, how do I know that my school community is serving my kid well? Or I'm touring schools, what should I look out for? Amanda Ripley, in her book, The Smartest Kids in the World, great book, highly recommend it. But at the end, in her epilogue, she talks about the different exercises you can take within your school community to learn about how your child is being served well. And I would say, reaching out to organizations like EdAllies, reaching out to other organizations that are working within your school district and saying, I want to help. What can I do? It's hard to find folks. Like, we're out there trying to organize and find them. So going to reach out to your local education advocacy group and saying, I want to do something. What can I do? They're going to have 50 ideas for you right off the bat.
I'm wondering, when you think about the people who have impacted you and your education, if you could give a toast to someone, who would you toast?
That's a great question. I would first say my mother. My mom, in order to avoid expulsion, she withdrew. So didn't come from an educational community that really supported her. She still really does face a lot of his educational trauma, refuses to this day. She's 64. Sorry, Mom, for telling your age on this, but has never gone to a high school reunion because she doesn't want to kind of revisit that educational trauma, and said, I don't want the same for my son. And so she invested in an opportunity that she knew very little about, because she knew that's what she wanted for me. She really kind of gave me that compass. I'll also say that the people in my life who said, I'm going to invest in you because historically you haven't received that investment. A lot of educators in my life were like, you're trouble. You look like a black boy. I'm black and Filipino. My mom's a Filipino immigrant. You look like a black boy. You must be trouble. And treated me like that. And so the professors, the teachers who are like, I'm going to give you more love and not treat you like a criminal, made me live up to their expectations. My Professor Chen in college, Miss Freeman in 6th grade, Miss Kazuki in 3rd grade. Like, these are teachers who said, I'm going to invest a lot more into you because I'm going to see your potential rather than what society tells me how I should see you as a Black boy. So, yeah, cheers to them.
Cheers to them, indeed. Cheers to them for enabling you to become who you are. And then I want to toast you as well. There's obviously an incredible amount of work that you've put in to be your authentic self and using your experience as an example for recognizing the discrepancies that exist in our underserved populations, and specifically with students, for doing the work of research and then taking that research and actually making change in our policies, but most for creating the ecosystem and for identifying I'll use your word, the lighthouse, for identifying the lighthouse and creating an ecosystem around it where one didn't exist before, where there was no lighthouse, but putting your stake in the sand and saying, no, this is it, and we're going to make this happen with all these other people. For that, this toast is for you.
This toast is for my community and my family. Yes.
Yes, that's exactly right. This toast is for your community and your family. Thank you for correcting me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now it's time for your toast.
I'm Henry's mom, Desiria, and I am translating for him.
Jag heter Henry och jag vill tacka Sofia Karlsson som är en bra fröken för att hon är snäll. Hon har lärt mig mycket genom de här 2 åren som jag har gått med henne. Snart kommer jag börja 3:e året. Och mina favoritämnen är matte och svenska. Men sen i 10:an kommer mina favoritämnen bli historia och träslöjd.
My name is Henry, and I would like to thank Sofia Karlsson. She's a very good teacher because she's kind. She's taught me a lot over the past 2 years. I'm about to start 3rd grade, and I really like math and Swedish, but I think I will really like history and woodworking.
Now it's your turn. Honor someone who has positively impacted your life by recording your own toast at ketoasts.com. Thanks for joining us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please tap the follow button, rate us using the star button, and share this podcast with someone to keep us going. Then go toast up some bread, because every positive action is worth toasting.
The teacher said, would you like to sit down? And I said, no. And so I didn't sit down. And the parent was like, oh, in Minnesota speak, that means sit down. Sit down, right? Like, I just learned that, can I sneak right by you real quick means get out of my way.
And also founder of Stonewall Sports.
Yeah, exactly. Twin Cities Stonewall Sports. When I moved to Minnesota, I was like, I don't have any friends. And there was LGBT rodeo and softball. And I was like, I'm afraid of softballs and rodeo, probably not up my alley. So then I just started kickball with like 60 people, and it's like hit 2,000 people.
If you didn't know anyone, but suddenly had 60 people signed up, you clearly are an organizer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we're it's an LGBT and ally sports community. I use sports loosely because we play kickball, tennis, bocce ball, cornhole, pickleball. But it's just a way for people to come out and have fun, come out in more ways than one.
I love it.
It's we're gonna have our national tournament coming up, which is gonna be super exciting. We're gonna have 1,000, 2,000 people from all over the country coming in to play some sports like cornhole.